Hello, dear friends. There have always been wars, unfortunately, but now the chaos has increased and the signs for the end of times, which should be a change of system, have appeared. Opinion piece. Wars and rumors of wars. Threat to supply chains. The stock market could fall by 15% in autumn. The world is in chaos and crisis all over the planet. Silent wars are waged with computers. 820 million people go hungry in the world. Revolutions, floods, earthquakes, and cyber attacks. Nation shall rise against nation, and kingdom against kingdom. For all these things must come to pass, but the end is not yet. Daniel. Many shall run to and fro, and science shall be increased. A hacker is valued more highly than an elite sniper. Gaming graphics cards help to develop nuclear fusion. US and China move even closer to all-out cyber warfare. Let's start. And in quotes, and ye shall hear of wars and rumors of wars. See that ye be not troubled, for all these things must to come to pass. But the end is not yet. For nation shall rise against nation, and kingdom against kingdom, and there shall be pestilences and famines and earthquakes in divers places. Matthew 24:6. Wars and rumors of wars are evident all over the world. There have always been wars, but not on the scale seen in our era. The US Army has generated two DEFCON level alerts. Revolutions against governments are occurring in Cuba and France. It is expected that crisis events around the world would require activation of an emergency broadcast system that would coincide with other things. Right now, there is a cyber attack targeting key ports in South Africa and natural disasters in China and Germany threatening supply chains. There are very current wars such as the conflict between Ethiopia and Sudan and the military intervention in Tigray affecting Ethiopia, Eritrea and Sudan, the Afghan civil war affecting Afghanistan and Pakistan, and the Yemeni civil war with Saudi Arabia's military intervention in Yemen. Before that were the Syrian civil war, the conflict between the Gaza Strip and Israel in 2021, the Boko Haram insurgency in Nigeria, Cameroon, Niger and Chad, or the war against drug trafficking in Mexico, but the list would be endless. Powerful changes. Powerful changes, according to Judith Castle. Immensely powerful changes have occurred in the last 24 hours. An ascent to much higher frequency bands with a powerful upward surge. It is like a massive energy vortex, and pulling and rising towards the new Earth as she is accelerating her ascension. Such is the blessing of the new Earth. The world is in crisis and chaos all over the planet. Climate change induced by the dark side has resulted in floods, deaths, earthquakes, tsunamis, damage to roads and airports, the disappearance of food sources, and the disruption of supply channels. The mainstream media continue to ignore cyber attacks on banks and businesses around the world that would lead to a stock market crash and a global financial crisis. John McAfee had his antivirus software installed on most government computers, which compiled all the wrongdoings of previous presidents and the staff. These 31 terabytes of terrible truth were stored on an encrypted blockchain and distributed throughout his cryptocurrency and crypto wallet WAC. A war is an armed struggle between two or more nations or between sides of the same nation. The Swedish International Peace Research Institute defines war as any armed conflict that meets two requirements. At least one military force is engaged, either against another army or other armies, or against an insurgent force, and 10,000 or more people have been killed. Between the end of the World War II and 2010, there were 246 armed clashes in 151 places around the world. Silent Weapons. Silent Weapons for Quiet Wars is the title of a book by Noam Chomsky. The Silent War was secretly declared by the international elite after a meeting held in 1954. Although the silent weapons system was almost exposed 13 years later, the evolution of this new weapon system has never suffered any major setbacks. These weapons fire situations instead of bullets, propelled by data processing instead of chemical reaction, firing their source from bytes of information instead of grains of powder, from a computer instead of a rifle, manipulated by a computer programmer instead of an elite sniper. Silent weapons produce no obvious blast noise, cause no apparent physical or mental harm, nor do they interfere in any obvious way with one's daily social life. It does, however, produce a noise and interferes in a way with everyday social life. The public cannot understand this weapon, and then cannot believe that it is actually attacked and subdued by this weapon. The public may instinctively feel that something is wrong, but because of the technical nature of this silent weapon, he cannot express his feeling rationally or handle the problem intelligently. Consequently, he doesn't know how to ask for help, and he doesn't know how to partner with others to defend himself. When a silent weapon is gradually applied, people adjust, adapt to its presence, and learn to tolerate its repercussions on their lives until the psychological or economical pressure becomes too great, and they sink. Consequently, the silent weapon attacks the vitality, choices, and mobility of a society's individuals, manipulating their social and natural energy sources, as well as their physical, mental, and emotional strengths and weaknesses. The end of times, or the end times. To understand Jesus' statement about wars and rumors of wars, to mean that war is a sign of the end times, is exactly the opposite of what he intended. Jesus taught us not to let wars or rumors of wars alarm or worry us, because it is not yet the end. So, we have always seen wars, we have always heard of wars, and from the beginning of the humanity, there have been rumors of war, but the wars Jesus talks about are very different. They are wars that threaten the existence of humanity, the survival of the planet, and of all the species that exist. So, Jesus makes a warning, in quotes, "For all this must come to pass, but it is not yet the end." Neither the Medo-Persian Empire, with its gigantic army and its medical wars against the Greeks, nor the cunning campaign of Alexander the Great, nor the majesty of the Roman Empire and the subjugation of its peoples, None of the wars waged by these powers threatened the destruction of the planet, although they produced much suffering among the people. All that changed in the middle of the 18th century with the Industrial Revolution and the steam engine, as it is prophesied in the book of Daniel 12:4, in quotes, "But you, Daniel, shut up the words and seal the book until the time of the end. Many shall run to and fro, and science shall increase." Technology and science have provided us with tools to be much more effective in killing. On August 6 and 9th, 1945, the two atomic bombs were dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, respectively. These were the days that changed the way mankind looks at war. For thousands of years, war was a symbol of destruction, death, sadness, despair, opportunity, increased wealth, and poverty for others. These are the rumors of war that Jesus talked about, wars capable of destroying humanity. But Christ warned us that this wouldn't be the end. Definition: war is strictly technical in it. War, in its strictly technical sense, is that serious social conflict in which two or more relatively massive human groups, mainly tribes, societies, or nations, confront each other violently, preferably throughout the use of weapons of all kinds, often resulting in death individually or collectively, and considerable material damage. It occurs in tribal societies and in civilized societies, but is more serious among the latter because they are more complex, massified, and technified. It is perhaps the oldest form of international relations, and already at the beginning of civilizations there is evidence of organized confrontation of armed human groups with the purpose of controlling natural or human resources or imposing some kind of tribute, ideology, or religion, subduing, dispossessing, and, if necessary, destroying the enemy. According to Sun Tzu, war is the greatest state conflict, the basis of life and death, the Tao of survival and extinction. Therefore, it is imperative to study it deeply. Moreover, the most astute way to exercise it would be to avoid it, so that there is no need for it. The so-called fourth generation warfare is a military doctrine denomination that includes guerrilla warfare, asymmetric warfare, low-intensity warfare, dirty warfare, state terrorism or similar, and covert operations, popular warfare, cyber warfare, terrorism and counter-terrorism, as well as propaganda in combination with non-conventional combat strategies that include cybernetics, civilian population, and politics. In this type of warfare, there is no confrontation between regular armies, not necessarily between states, but between a state and violent groups of a political, economic, religious, or ethnic nature. Military news. U.S. carries out second strike in Somalia this week. The U.S. military said it carried out an air-strike Friday against Al-Shabaab militants in Somalia in the second such action this week. Strikes against Taliban. The U.S. Air Force, USAF, is conducting airstrikes against Taliban fighters on the outskirts of Kandahar, Argamdad, and Sahi Wali Kot. Herat resists Taliban. Afghan President Ashraf Ghani spent the day trying to reassure his people as government forces battled the Taliban for control of districts across the country. Ghani was seen walking down the street in the western city of Herat on Monday as the armed Taliban group waged a fierce campaign to seize as much territory as it could amid the vacuum created by the withdrawal of US forces. Russia returns to Afghanistan. Russia has already deployed its main battle tanks to the Afghanistan-Tajikistan border. Fighter jets are expected to be deployed in the coming days. Russian Air Force launched an airstrike against militants in Al-Bara area in Syria's Idlib province. Tajikistan says it is ready to take in up to 100,000 Afghan refugees. Tajikistan is preparing to receive up to 100,000 refugees from neighboring Afghanistan, where fighting has intensified as US-led troops withdraw. He risked his life as a US interpreter and is now the Naval Reserve. Sam Al-Heli's long journey to wear a US military uniform culminated July 16th when he was commissioned as a lieutenant in the Navy Reserve during a ceremony at the Special Operations Forces Memorial Park at MacDill Air Force Base in Tampa, Florida. British maneuvers with India. The United Kingdom's Carrier Strike Group has begun naval drills with the Indian Navy, led by the Queen Elizabeth. It has met with the Indian Navy in the Bay of Bengal for 3 days of complex maritime interactions. Secret nuclear submarine. The US Navy's secret nuclear submarine will be a Predator operating behind enemy lines. It will be faster, a larger payload, and higher speed with acoustic superiority. Venezuela denounces the violation of its airspace by a US military aircraft. The Venezuelan Ministry of Defense denounced on Friday the violation of its airspace by a C-17 heavy military transport aircraft belonging to the US Air Force. Throughout a communique, the Bolivarian National Armed Forces detailed that the illegal incursion occurred for a period of 3 minutes during the night of Thursday, July 22nd. US and China move even closer to all-out cyber war. China has been hacking and attacking US corporations and the defense industry for at least a decade, and some subsequent administrations, with the exception of the last one, have allowed Beijing a free pass. The next US-China cyber war will be swift, brutal, and system shutdowns would lead to unknown outcomes. President Trump made it clear from the beginning that the relationship with China was not going to be status quo. Beijing was informed that its favorable trade agreements were to be reworked. Trump did not tolerate Beijing colonizing the South China Sea, and any piracy by China would be met with a similar response. But that all changed on January 20, when Joe Biden was inaugurated as president in quotes. Protests. South African riots. Riots in the South Africa this month claimed 337 lives, marking a new jump in the death toll from the 276 announced the day before. Gunfire erupts at Haitian president's funeral. The funeral of slain Haitian President Jovenel Moïse was interrupted by gunfire that prompted the U.S. delegation to quickly leave the scene, the Miami Herald reported. Italians take to the streets to protest against mandatory passes. Demonstrators shout no to dictatorship after the Italian government followed other European countries in announcing mandatory passports. First visit by a Chinese president to Tibet in 31 years. Xi Jinping is making a visit to the Tibet Autonomous Region, the first by a Chinese president in 31 years. The leader arrived in the southeastern city of Ningxi on Wednesday. His visit coincides with the 70th anniversary of the invasion of Tibet by communist troops, which Beijing considers a peaceful liberation in quotes. Immigration. Morocco aborts an attempt to access 150 people throughout the fence of Melilla. The migratory pressure on Melilla has continued this Friday, hours after the largest entry of irregular since 2014, with attempts by land through the double fence and by sea by swimming throughout the coastal area. Also in Belgium, about 400 migrants had been on hunger strike in Brussels for 2 months to demand work and residence permits. In the middle of this week, they have temporarily suspended their proposal, following an agreement with the government. Canada deports its refugees. In 2017, in response to then President Trump's so-called Muslim ban, Canadian President Justin Trudeau tweeted, in quotes, "For those fleeing persecution, terror and war, Canadians will welcome them regardless of their faith." However, the reality on the ground is very different. While routinely praised for its extraordinary generosity toward refugees, Trudeau's Canada is deporting asylum seekers en masse. Natural disasters. Floods around the world. First, heavy flooding in Italy. Second, residents of Manila, Philippines line up in the rain on a flooded street near the San Andres Sports Complex. Third, earthquake in the Philippines. A strong earthquake with a magnitude of 6.7 struck off the coast of Mindoro Island in the Philippines on Saturday morning. The epicenter was located at the depth of 112 kilometers, 16 kilometers west of Calatagan. Fourth, strong storms bombarded Ukraine overnight and 2 people were killed. The port city of Odessa was flooded. Fifth, tunnels flooded throughout China. A subway CCP military base was flooded in Zhengzhou, Henan province. Sixth, heavy flooding in northeastern Turkey. Heavy downpours caused severe flooding in Turkey's Black Sea region. Seventh, United Kingdom. Thunderstorms mapped amid 48-hour rain and flood warning. Thunderstorms will be a constant threat on Saturday. Toxic red tide causes new fish die-off on Florida's west coast. The toxic algae known as red tide has caused a new die-off marine wildlife, including the state's iconic manatee on Florida's Gulf of Mexico coast in recent days, and is keeping its presence high in 5 counties. Disagreement on climate change. Energy and environment ministers from the group of 20 rich countries failed to agree in Naples on the wording of a key climate change compromise in their final communique. Although they agreed to accelerate the ecological transition, they failed to agree on issues such as eliminating fossil fuel subsidies or limiting carbon dioxide emissions. Landslides in western India. Landslides triggered by heavy monsoon rains have hit parts of western India, killing at least 36 people and prompting overnight rescue of more than 1,000 people trapped by floods. 120 million people go hungry in the world, while the price of food is a growing trend, aggravating the global picture. For this reason, the United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres convened the Food System Summit 2021 from July 26 to 28 in Rome. Food prices have been on an upward trend on the world market for several months. Catastrophe in famine-stricken southern Madagascar. More than 1 million people are in need of emergency food aid, and 14,000 are already in catastrophic conditions. Years of low rainfall have made farming impossible, while sandstorms have rendered barren large tracts to arable land that were cleared of their natural forest. The United Nations estimate that Madagascar will need $78.6 million to provide vital food aid for the upcoming lean season starting in October. Various aid groups have been distributing hundreds of tons of food for months with the help of the government, but this is not enough. Finance. US stock market could fall 15% in fall. The stock market could fall 50% or more by the end of October in a challenging period for markets, said Scott Minerd, President and Chief Investment Officer of Guggenheim Investments. The expert expects a difficult fall on Wall Street. In quotes, September and October are likely to be very difficult this year for stocks. Minerd said the main risk factor for stocks would be a faster than expected tapering of Federal Reserve asset purchases. Treasury Secretary warns Congress on debt limit. Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen on Friday urged lawmakers to raise or suspend the nation's debt limit as soon as possible, and warned that if Congress fails to act by August 2nd, the Treasury Department would have to take extraordinary measures to avoid a default. Stocks rise. Stocks rose Friday, with Wall Street pointing to a fourth straight session of gains after another string of solid gains, which helped investors put Monday's sudden massive sell-off in the rear-view mirror. Stock market all-time high. The S&P 500 and Nasdaq indexes hit record highs Friday and were on track to end the week with gains, helped by mega-cap growth stocks and solid earnings from social networking companies, while a weak forecast from Intel hit chip makers. Eurozone activity rises at fastest pace in 21 years. Eurozone activity rose in July at the strongest pace in 21 years, thanks to a pull from the services sector amid a reopening after restrictions, but there are also warnings of sharp rise in prices. Chip shortages. The semiconductor shortage that has gripped the world could last until 2022 and affect smartphone production thereafter, portending poor supplies for a variety of household appliances and industrial equipment, industry executives and economists said. And an analyst explains why the dollar's golden days are numbered. The dollar appears less and less in commercial transactions between countries. Many prefer to carry out exchanges in their own currencies, according to financial analyst Mikhail Kogan. In quotes, it should be noted that the emergence of the euro and the gradual strengthening of the yuan as the world's second currency in the national reserves were events that seriously affected the dollar's dominant position. The analyst said, Russian central bank wants stock exchanges against cryptocurrencies. The Central Bank of Russia advised domestic stock exchanges not to admit shares of cryptocurrency-related companies due to their high volatility, low transparency, and other risks posed by cryptos. The regulator stressed that digital assets carry higher risks for people who do not have sufficient experience and knowledge in the subject, like me. Science and technology. A student becomes first amateur astronomer to discover new moon in Jupiter's orbit. A student named Kylie has become the first amateur astronomer to discover a planetary moon previously unknown to science. Scientists warn that cases of schizophrenia linked to cannabis use are on the rise. A group of Danish researchers say the proportion of schizophrenia cases linked to cannabis use has increased significantly over the past 25 years. Gaming graphic cards help develop nuclear fusion. Advances in gaming graphics cards have been harnessed for a new plasma control system in a prototype fusion reactor. A challenge in replicating the energy produced by the sun on Earth is the dynamic nature of the plasmas, which must be controlled to reach the required temperatures to allow the fusion process to occur. And that's all for today. Have a happy weekend, dear friends. That's all.